Assalamualaikum everyone. We are group 6 and today we will be presenting about the Nick Allen case. We hope you will stay focused and have a clear understanding about what we are going to present. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good afternoon everyone. My name is Nurul Alia binti Muhammad Isa and my matric number is 1251320. Today we will discuss a core aspect of Malaysia legal identity, which is dual justice system, and how the recent landmark case of Nick Allen Zurina shapes its future. Malaysia is home to a unique legal framework where civil law and Sharia law run side by side. The system is a product of our history, heavily influenced by British colonial rule, which introduced the common law. However, it is vital to remember that the Federal Constitution remains the supreme law of the land. It strictly divides lawmaking powers, which is the Federal Parliament creates national laws, while State Legislative Assemblies or DUN create state-specific laws, including Islamic enactments. To keep these two systems from clashing, the Constitution introduced Article 121, Clause 1A. This article draws a clear boundary, ensuring civil and Sharia courts do not interfere with each other. While Article 3 gives state the right to govern Islamic matters, Sharia courts are still legally bounded by federal limits, especially regarding criminal punishments. Despite these clear constitutional rules, dividing this power in daily life can cause public debate, especially when it touches on fundamental liberties like freedom of religion under Article 11 or overlapping criminal jurisdiction. This brings us to one of the most significant cases in our constitutional history, which is Nick Allen Zurina versus the State Government of Kelantan. In this presentation, we will examine these legal boundaries and explore the constructive way forward for Islamic law in Malaysia.
Okay, now let's move on to the next part, which is background of Nick Allen case. Firstly, the Nick Allen case began in May 2022 when a constitutional petition was filed directly to the Federal Court under the Article 4 Clause 4 of the Federal Constitution. This provision allows the Federal Court to determine whether a state law is inconsistent with the Federal Constitution. The petition was filed by a lawyer, Nick Allen Zurina Nick Abdul Rashid, and her daughter, Tengku Yasmin Natasha. They brought the case because they believed that several provisions in the Kelantan Sharia Criminal Code were unconstitutional. In this petition, they challenged 20 provisions of the Kelantan Sharia Criminal Code 1 Enactment 2019, which came into force in November 2021. The petitioners argued that the Kelantan State Legislative Assembly had exceeded its constitutional legislative powers by enacting laws that were outside its authority. They challenged provisions included such as sodomy, incest, sexual harassment, and the destruction of places of worship. According to the petitioners, these are general criminal offences, not matters that fall exclusively within the jurisdiction of the state legislature. They further argued that these offences are already covered under the federal list in the 9th schedule of the Federal Constitution. Therefore, only the Federal Parliament has the authority to legislate on these criminal matters. On the other hand, the respondents argued that the provisions were intended to regulate the conduct of Muslims and to enforce Islamic principles within the state's constitutional powers. However, the petitioners clarified that their challenge was not directed against Islam or Islamic teachings. Instead, they were questioning whether the Kelantan one state legislative assembly had the constitutional authority to enact laws that overlap with existing federal criminal laws. In summary, the Ni case was primarily a constitutional dispute concerning the division of legislative powers between the federal parliament and the state legislature, rather than a challenge to Islamic law itself.
Now let's take a look at the impacts of the Ni case. The first impact is the review and reassessment of state Islamic laws. This case has encouraged state legislative assemblies to re-evaluate existing Islamic laws to ensure that they remain within constitutional boundaries. One of the important issues highlighted in this case is that any law enacted at the state level must comply with Article 4, Clause 1 of the Federal Constitution, which establishes constitutional supremacy in Malaysia. Therefore, the case demonstrates that although states have authority over certain Islamic matters, that authority must still operate within the limits provided by the Constitution. This encouraged lawmakers to conduct more careful legal assessments before introducing or passing legislation. The second impact is the increase in public discussion and awareness. The decision attracted widespread attention and opened broader discussions among society regarding the implementation of Sharia law in Malaysia. Many members of the public turned to legal experts and social media platforms to better understand the constitutional and legal issues involved in the case. This increased engagement reflects a growing awareness among Malaysians about legal developments and the relationship between Islamic law and constitutional principles. It also shows that public understanding plays an important role in supporting informed discussions on legal reform. The third impact is the influence on public perception of Islamic law. The case highlighted concerns regarding the possibility of overlapping legal provisions and questions surrounding fairness and consistency in implementation. As a result, different views emerge among the public. So some individuals support the decision because they view it as protecting constitutional principles, while others express concern about the authority and future role of Sharia institutions. These different perspectives contribute to wider public engagement and encourage more critical discussion regarding the administration of Islamic law in Malaysia. The fourth impact is the development of legal precedents and reform. The Nick Allen case may influence future constitutional and Sharia-related disputes because it provides guidance on legislative boundaries and constitutional interpretation. It also demonstrates that legal reform can be pursued through constitutional and judicial process rather than through political disagreement alone. In the long term, this may contribute to improvement in the legal system while ensuring that both constitutional principles and religious values continue to be respected.
Now, let us address the core question: what is the way forward for Islamic law in Malaysia following the Ni case in 2024? The first strategic pillar is reforming how state legislative assemblies don't draft and enact laws. The Ni case made it clear that several Sharia criminal provisions in Kelantan were invalid due to technical limits on state powers. Moving forward, state government cannot act in isolation. They must recognize that if the actual substance of a law, what we call the bits and substance, belongs to the federalists, the state has no power to touch it. To prevent future laws from being struck down by civil courts, we need a mandatory screening process. Before any state Sharia enactment is drafted, there must be compulsory consultation between state committees, the Attorney General's Chambers, AGC, and constitutional experts. Furthermore, federal bodies like the MKI Special Committee must be fully utilized as advisory organs to create safe, constitutionally sound legal guidelines. The second pillar focused on legalizing jurisdictional harmonization through the federal parliament. The federal court emphasized that state government cannot expand Sharia criminal jurisdiction unilaterally. If there is a genuine, substantive need to increase punishment or expand Sharia offences, it must be done through the proper federal channels, specifically by amending Act 355, the Sharia Courts Criminal Jurisdiction Act. Shifting our approach from conflict to constructive harmonization is essential. Resolving dispute properly through the courts and channeling amendments through Parliament ensure that Islamic law is strengthened in an organized, lawful manner. Most importantly, it protects Muslim citizens from the risk of double jeopardy, meaning they won't face the risk of being prosecuted twice for the same offence under both civil and Sharia tracts. The third and perhaps most practical pillar is to shift our focus and resources away from pursuing general criminal autonomy and instead strengthen the Sharia courts existing exclusive jurisdiction. Under Article 121 Clause 1A, the Sharia courts hold absolute, fully protected power over personal law, family law, and the precept of Islam. Civil court cannot touch this area. Therefore, the future direction should be upgrading what we already have. We must focus on improving administrative efficiency, standardizing Islamic family laws across states, managing estate distribution like fara'id, waqaf, and trust properties, and establishing a more aggressive enforcement system to track down fathers who fail to pay child maintenance, which is nafkah. By upgrading technological infrastructure and providing continuous training for Sharia judges, we elevate the quality and image of Islamic justice. This will, through public trust, far more effectively than expanding punitive laws that overlap with the Federal Penal Code. In conclusion, empowering Islamic law post-Ni'elin does not require emotional argument. Conversely, we require strategic and legal approach. By reforming state drafting procedures through AGC consultation, utilizing Parliament for amendment like Act 355, and prioritizing personal and family law administration, we ensure that Islamic legal institutions grow stronger, respect the federal constitution, and gain higher trust from the public. Thank you.
In conclusion, the Nick Erling case has played a significant role in influencing the future development of Islamic law in Malaysia. Rather than challenging the validity of Islamic law itself, the case highlighted the importance of ensuring justice, fairness, and constitutional compliance in the process of lawmaking and implementation. The case also increased awareness among state legislative assemblies regarding the need to carefully review and reassess Islamic legislation before enactment. This highlights the importance of legal consultation and proper constitutional evaluation to avoid jurisdictional conflicts in the future. Furthermore, the case serves as an example of how legal reform can occur through constitutional and judicial mechanisms while still respecting religious traditions and values. It shows that legal development and religious principles do not necessarily conflict, but can coexist with an organized constitutional framework. Overall, the Nick Erling case provides an important reference for the future direction of Islamic law in Malaysia. Its legacy continues to encourage the development of legal system and upholds justice, equality, constitutional order, and respect for religious values in a diverse society. Thank you. That's all from us.